What if everything we've been told about autoimmunity is wrong? I'm Elizabeth Yarnell. After awakening partially blind one morning in 1999, a doctor told me my multiple sclerosis would put me in a wheelchair within 10 years. I refused to accept that as the end of the story, so I started investigating. Welcome to the Inflammation Investigator, the podcast that uncovers the inflammation lurking underneath your ailments. Because autoimmune and chronic conditions should not be viewed as death knells when they are actually alarm bells. I'm a traditional naturopath and founder of the Inflammation Academy. And in 2 episodes every week, we dig into what conventional medicine might be missing. If you're living with chronic or unexplained symptoms, this investigation is for you. Your body has been trying to tell you something. Let's start listening.
We've been talking about inflammation and autoimmunity and traditional naturopathy versus conventional allopathic medicine. And today I want to introduce you to a central theme of what this whole podcast is all about. And I boil it all down to the phrase that autoimmunity is an oxymoron. Do you know what an oxymoron is? Might be something you might want to look up now that we're talking about it, but basically it means that it's something that is the opposite of what it thinks it is. So I am going to be reading today from my computer screen as well, so don't take that offensively if I'm not looking directly at you the whole time. But here we go. Late one night in January 1999, I was awake in my apartment crafting an article I was working on for the Denver Post about cross-country skiing. After days of research and interviews, I sent what I hoped would be the penultimate draft over to my inkjet printer. I glanced over the printout as I brushed my teeth and noticed 3 places in the text where I wanted to make edits. But I was too tired to get back on my computer or even jot down some notes, and so I set it aside for the morning and I went to bed. I should have taken the time. I had no idea that everything in my life was about to change, literally overnight. The next morning, when I set the pages next to a cup of coffee on my sunny kitchen table, I struggled to read the words or even make out letters. It was as if a huge cloud had floated in front of my eyeballs, blotting out words here and there. The page in front of me now appeared as if the printer had skipped over sections of text due to low ink. Words, phrases, and indeed full paragraphs had disappeared from my view. My brain struggled to make sense of what I was seeing, or rather, what I was not seeing. What had happened to the pages overnight? Was it some sort of disappearing ink trick? I was confused till I realized it wasn't that the words weren't on the page. The words were there. The problem was with my eyes. In fact, I could see the text in its entirety when I closed my right eye and only looked through my left eye, though the sentences I had written just the night before now seemed entirely unfamiliar. But this wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was that I could no longer identify the 3 important edits I'd spied just a few hours earlier. How was I going to revise the story before my deadline at the end of the day when I could no longer tell what needed to be fixed? I worried that my first assignment from this editor would become my last. I struggled to read through the draft again and could tell my brain wasn't working right. The words weren't making any sense, and trying to sort it out was giving me an awful headache centered deep behind my right eye. Time was running out for me, though, and at dusk, I reluctantly emailed a submission to my editor of what I knew in my heart to be substandard work. What else could I do? As a freelance journalist, I was certain this draft contained mistakes that would likely jeopardize both my assignments and earnings in the future. But at that moment, I couldn't see any other option. My vision wasn't clearing up on its own, and the paragraphs were making less and less sense to me as the day wore on. Something was definitely not right inside my head. A few weeks later, after an MRI scan of my brain showed evidence of scarring from inflammation indicative of a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, and after appointments with several local doctors, I found myself across the country with a famous neurologist who was a specialist in the medical treatments then available for MS. I stood in front of an eye chart in his office, covered my right eye, and read the chart with my left eye. FSDTL, I rattled off easily. But when I covered my left eye and tried to read, I can't even see when I covered my left eye, covered my left eye and tried to read a line of letters, I couldn't see any of the characters. In fact, I couldn't even see the chart. All I saw with my right eye was white. Not the white of the eye chart, and not the white of the painted wall upon which it hung, but the white that is the absence of everything. It was as if I was looking at the inside of a cloud. Optic neuritis, or inflammation of the optic nerve, I learned, is a common harbinger of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is an unpredictable autoimmune condition where inflammation in the central nervous system disrupts the flow of information both within the brain and between the brain and the body. I hadn't ever paid that much attention to my health before, but now I was getting an intensive education in inflammation and what it can do to a human body. Then the doctor told me to open both eyes, and he pointed to another chart hanging on a different wall. In my memory, this one showed a line in a straight 45-degree angle slope down from the top left corner, indicating no disability, to the lower right corner of complete disability over time. He pointed to the lower right corner. This was where, he assured me, in a somewhat robotic manner, everyone with multiple sclerosis eventually ends up at the bottom right corner of the chart, riddled with disabilities until they die of total system shutdown. According to his extensive research and significant professional experience, the loss of abilities was a foregone conclusion, with the only variable being how long it would take me to get there. In other words, it was only a matter of time until I ended up in the lower right corner too. I dropped my head and squeezed my eyes closed against the horror foretold in that chart. But what if I eat a healthy diet and exercise my body and brain? I asked, desperately trying to cling to any possible hope of avoiding the slide down that one-way slope of disability and despair. The doctor shook his head, no. Of course, it's always better to eat a healthy diet, he allowed, though he couldn't say what that might look like, nor did he believe it would make any difference in the trajectory of my disease. The only thing he could recommend was to consider beginning what he called a disease-modifying therapy, or DMT, as soon as possible. Not a disease-curing therapy, because according to the medical community, there was no cure for MS. Rather, the goal of a disease-modifying therapy is to slow the course and mitigate the impacts of the inevitable flare-ups of inflammation. In the immediate term, I was to return home to begin a multi-day course of intravenous infusions of the corticosteroid drug, Solumedrol, in the hope of reducing the inflammation in my optic nerve before permanent damage occurred. In Relapsing-Remitting Multiple Sclerosis, RRMS, my official diagnosis, sufferers experience clearly defined exacerbations, or flares, of new or increasing neurological symptoms, followed by periods of partial or complete remission when the inflammation recedes. A relapse might never occur again. One might remain in remission indefinitely. But more likely, sooner or later, the remission period will end when the next exacerbation arrives to initiate a relapse into symptoms. The doctor told me that no one knew why I had come down with multiple sclerosis, nor how to cure it once it appeared. I had inexplicably become allergic to myself. Autoimmune. He strongly encouraged me to consider one of the 3 pharmaceutical DMT options then available in order to attempt to sideline the overactive immune system blamed for my condition and slow down the inevitable progression. Always a researcher, I diligently read up on all of the options presented. Upon this deeper investigation, I noticed that each pharmaceutical medicine reported questionably low efficacy rates, well below 50%, in both slowing down the progression of the disease and decreasing the severity of the symptoms. In addition to being likely ineffective, incredibly expensive, the National MS Society reports 40% of MS patients stop taking or alter their use of meds due to the high cost, and requiring needles to administer. Each of these options also carried the risk of serious side effects, including seizures, blood, liver, and heart problems, and even death. Regardless of anything I did or didn't do, or drugs I did or didn't take, the odds were still high that I would end up seriously disabled and likely in a wheelchair because I had MS. I had a lot to cry about on the flight home. In the next episode, we'll talk about how inflammation is at the core of multiple sclerosis. We'll see you then.
And that's another case filed on the Inflammation Investigator. Remember, every symptom is your body's way of communicating. We just need to learn the language. If today's episode sparked something for you, I want to hear about it. Share your own investigation discoveries with me on social media at Elizabeth Yarnell, or find me at elizabethyarnell.com. Your experience could be exactly what another listener needs to hear. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And here's the thing about investigations. They work best when you're not going it alone. If this podcast is helping you uncover the answers you've been searching for, please like, rate, subscribe, and review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. As a new podcast, these actions mean more than you know. Want to dive deeper into your own inflammation investigation? Head over to inflammationinvestigator.com, where you can take my free inflammation quiz to uncover which hidden triggers might be affecting your health. Until next time, this is Elizabeth Yarnell, your Inflammation Investigator, reminding you that the solutions to your health issues are out there. Let's find them together.